feeling for yesterday? Your physical feelings and conscious, your physical feelings and conscious thoughts cohere with your actions, and all of it makes perfect sense within larger cultures, within larger culture of which you are a part. As you make an offering to God, you don't think, what does this all mean? Why am I doing this? The experience of meaningfulness just happens. It emerges automatically from cross-level coherence, cross-level coherence. Once again, happiness or a sense of meaningfulness and imparts richness to experience comes uh, from between. In contrast, think about the last empty ritual you took part in. Maybe you were asked to join hands and chant with a group of strangers while attending a wedding ceremony for a friend who is a different religion. Perhaps you took part in a new age ceremony that's borrowed elements from Native Americans, ancient Celts, and Tibetan Buddhists. You probably understood the symbolism of the ritual, understood its consciously and explicitly, understood it consciously and explicitly, and the way that the writer is so good at doing. Yet you felt self-conscious, maybe even silly while doing it. Sometime something was missing. You can't just invent a good ritual through reasoning about symbolism. You need a tradition within which the symbolism embedded, and you need to invoke bodily feelings that have some appropriate association. Then you need a community to endorse and practice it over time. To the extent that a community has many rituals that cohere across three levels, people in the community are likely to feel themselves connected to the community and its traditions. If the community also offers guidance on how to live and what is of value, then people are unlikely to wonder about the question of purpose within life. Meaning and purpose simply emerges from the coherence, and people can get on with the business of living. But conflict paralysis and anomalies, conflict paralysis and anomalies are likely Anomalies are likely when a community fails to provide coherence, or worse, when its practices contradict people's gut feelings of their shared mythology and ideology. Martin Luther King Jr. forced Americans to confront contradictions between practice of racial segregation and ideals about equality and freedom. Many people didn't like that. People don't necessarily need to find meaning in their national identity. Indeed, in large, the diverse nation such as United States, Russia, and India, religion might hold great promise for cross-level coherence and purpose within life. Religious religions do such a good job of creating coherence. In fact, that's some scholars believe they were designed for that purpose. God gives us hives. When I first began to study morality as a philosophy major in college, my father said, "Why aren't you studying religion too? How could people have morality without God?" As a young atheist with a strong sense of morality, into over the border into self-righteousness, I was insulted by my father's suggestion. Morality, I thought, was about relationship among people. It was about a commitment to doing the right thing even when it goes against your self-interest. Religion, I thought, was a bunch of rules that made no sense and stories that could never have happened, written down by people, then falsely attributed to a supernatural entity. I now believe my father was right. Morality has its origins in religion, but not for the reason he believed. Morality and religion does occur in some form in all human cultures, and all forms, and almost always both intertwined with the values, identity, and daily life of the culture. anyone who wants to full Anyone who wants a full cross-level account of human nature and of how how human beings find purpose and meaning in their lives must make that account coherent, must make that account cohere with what is known as is what with what is known about morality and religion. From an evolutionary perspective, morality is a problem. If evolution is all about survival of the fittest, then why do people help each other so much? Why do they give to charity, risk their lives to save strangers, and volunteer to fight in wars? Darwin thought the answer was easy. Altruism evolves for the good of the group. There can be no doubt that a tribe, including many members who form possession, who from possessing, sorry, there can be no doubts, excuse me, there can be no doubt that a tribe, including many members who, from possessing in a high degree the spirit of patriotism, fidelity, obedience, courage, and sympathy, were always ready to aid one another and to sacrifice themselves for the common good would be virtue, it would be victorious over most other tribes. And this would be natural selection. Darwin proposed the group competes just like individuals, and therefore psychological features that make groups successful, such as patriotism, courage, and altruism towards fellow group members, should spread like any other traits. But once evolutionary theorists began testing predictions rigorously, using computers to model the interactions of individuals who use various strategies such as pure selfishness versus tit for tat. They quickly came to appreciate the seriousness of the free rider problem. In groups in which people make sacrifices for the common good, an individual who makes no sacrifice, who in effect takes a free ride on the backs of the altruists, come out ahead. In the code logic of these computer simulations, whoever accumulates the most resources in one generation goes to produce more children in the next. So selfishness is adaptive, but altruism is not. The only solution to the free rider problem is to make altruism pay and back sorry excuse me, to make altruism pay, and two back-to-back breakthroughs in evolutionary thinking showed how to do that. In chapter 3, I presented keen altruism. Be nice to those who share your genes, and reciprocal altruism. Be nice to those who might reciprocate in the future. As two steps on the way to ultra socialist as two steps to the way of ultra socialists. Once the two solutions to the free rider problem were published in 1966 and 1971, respectively, most evolutionary theorists considered the problem of altruism solved and essentially declared group selection illegal. Altruism could be explained and always altruism could be explained away. Altruism could be explained away as a special kind of selfishness, and anyone who followed Darwin in thinking that evolution worked for the good of the group instead of the good of the individual, or better yet, the good of the gene, was dismissed as a mushy head romantic. The ban on group selection had one loophole for creatures that really do compete, live and die as a group, such as the other ultra-social animals, bees, wasps, ants, termites, and naked mole rats. Group selection explanation where appropriate. There is a real sense in which a beehive or an ant colony is a single organism. Each insect is cell in the larger body, like stem cells. Ants take different physical forms to perform specific functions needed by the colony. Small bodies to care for larvae, large bodies with special appendage to forage for food or fight off attackers like cells in the immune system. Ants will sacrifice themselves to protect the colony. In one species of Malaysian ants, members of the soldiers cast stores to sticky substances. Uh, Cased? Cast stores to sticky substances. The sticky substance just under their exoskeletons. In the midst of battle, they explode their bodies, turning themselves into suicide bombers to gum up their adversities. To gum up their adversaries. For ants and bees, the queen is not the brain. She is the ovary, and the entire hive or colony can be seen as the body shaped by natural selection. To protect the ovary and help it create more hives or colonies, because all members really are in the same boat. Group selection is not just permissible as an explanation, it is mandatory. Might this loophole apply to humans as well? Do humans compete, live, die as a group? Do humans compete, live, and die as a group? Tribes and ethnic groups do grow and spread, they fade, do grow and spread or fade and die out. And sometimes this process has occurred by genocide. Furthermore, human societies often have an extraordinary division of labor, so the comparison to bees and ants is tempting, but as long as each human being has the opportunity to reproduce and evolutionary payoffs for investing in one's own welfare and one's offspring will almost always exceed the payoff for contributing to the group. In the long run, selfish traits will therefore spread at the expense of altruist traits. Even during war and genocide, when group interests are most compelling, who- who- during even during war and genocide, when group interests are most compelling, it is coward it is the coward who runs and hide rather than joining his comrades on the front line, who is most likely to pass on his genes to the next generation. Evolutionary theorists have therefore stood united since the early 1970s in their belief that group selection simply did not play a role in shaping human nature. But wait a second, this is not an all or nothing issue. Even if the competition of individuals within a group is the most important process in human evolution, group selection, competition between groups could have played a role too. The evolutionary biologist Solon, David Solon Wilson, David Solon Wilson has recently argued that the banishment of group selection theories on the basis of some oversimplified computer models from the 1960s was one of the biggest mistakes in the history of modern biology. If you make the models more realistic, more like real human beings, group selection jumps right out of you. Wilson points out that human beings evolve at the two levels simultaneously genetics and culture. The simple models of the 1960s worked well for creatures without culture. For them, behavioral traits must all be encoded in the genes, which are passed on only along lines of kinship. But everything a person does is influenced not only by her gene, but also by her culture, and cultures evolve too because elements of culture show variation. People invent new things and selection. Other people do or don't adapt their variation. Cultural traits can be analyzed in a Darwinian framework just as well as physical traits, birds, beaks, griffins, necks, cultural elements. Oh, yeah, so I'll just leave it there. 60 minutes. Well, that was good for today. Adios.